Hi, this is Andrea for the Learning Bear Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about our senses. And we're really going to be hitting on our sense of taste. We're going to focus on herbs for tasting for obvious reasons. They're food that are somewhat common in cooking, and depending on how much you cook in your home, there's a few different ways you can get them into your home. The most ideal way would be to buy them from seeds and grow them. They have really cool little kid-friendly pots that you can buy at like Lowe's or other stores that sell plants. You can just buy the seeds yourself and plant them in your flower beds or in your garden or in a pot on the windowsill. Anything like that is easy to do. Herbs don't take a lot to grow, and something easy like basil will pop through very quickly when you throw those fresh seeds in the dirt and give them some water. And some herbs take to water very easily, so you don't have to worry about them being overwatered as much. Basil is one of them. It is often grown in hydroponic gardens, meaning it's just water and no dirt. Some herbs do not like as much water, so if you're growing stevia or something, they prefer more dry environments, so don't water them as much. If you pay attention to your herbs, you can tell very quickly what they like and what they don't like. You just have to kind of look at them every day and see what they're doing, just like you would check on your kid or your pet or your family. You just have to pay attention to them, look at them every day, see how they're doing. If growing is not an option for you, growing them from seed, you can buy fully grown plants in the grocery store, in the produce department. I'm sure you've probably seen them. It's very popular right now. You can also buy them at, your home improvement store like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, Menards, depending on where you are. Any place that has a gardening section will have potted herbs that you can buy. And sometimes these are in these like nice fancy pots for indoor. You can also plant them in your flower bed or your garden too. It's nice to have them inside because you can easily pick them quickly. I like to have them inside, but you can definitely do them outside. I've done that as well. If that is still not appeasing to you, you can buy fresh herbs in packages in the produce department. They're located in the cooler section. They're in these little plastic containers, cilantro and parsley and basil and all those sorts of things. You're going to have a limited variety versus what you could grow yourself. You may only have 5 or 6 herbs available to you versus anything you could imagine if you grow them yourself. But I understand not everybody feels comfortable growing plants, so I want to make sure that you have all the options you can to do this activity. So we're going to basically build a 5 senses garden, and you're going to cover with your children sight, smell, touch, sound, and taste. Typically, if you've watched my other videos, you know that I don't support tasting when you're on hikes or outside because you just don't know. Even if you know what the plant is, there could be pesticides that have been put on it. I mean, there's just so many things. But if you're growing the seeds yourself or you're buying a plant in the grocery store or in a hardware store, it's meant to be eaten, especially those in the grocery store. So it's okay for you to taste things here. And some things you may just taste. You may just taste it and spit it out because you don't like it. And same goes for your children, and that's okay. Not everybody likes basil. I'm not a huge fan of it fresh. I prefer it cooked, but there are certain environments where I do like it fresh. Same goes for a lot of other herbs for a lot of other people. So I suggest using at least 5 herbs, and this is because you can get all of the senses, and you can have a nice variety. You can also, we're going to talk about some cooking that you can do with each of these herbs. You can break it up so each day that you do some sort of cooking experiment with your kids. So 5 days, Monday through Friday. If you want to do 7, then you have one for every day of the week. My top suggestions would be, as far as approachable for your kids and to hit all of those sensory experiences, specifically a different touch feel, would be mint, basil, dill, and rosemary. Mint and basil feel very similar, but they have very strong smells. And dill and rosemary have very unique feel about them in addition to their own smell, and they look different than mint and basil. Sight or sound you're going to have a little bit of an issue with just because they're plants, they're not animals. But it's a good experiment all the same, just for them to kind of see if they hear anything, which is kind of an oxymoron right there. So these are my top 4 suggestions. I would like you to pick your number 5, but I will provide you with plenty of other options as we go along that you can explore for yourself. Most people feel very strongly about some things and not others, so you may already have something in mind. And if you don't, then again, I will hopefully have some inspiration for you. So the procedure here, if you're just buying in herbs and talking about your kids, this does not involve any lead up if you're growing the plants or anything like that. This is strictly just looking over the 5 senses. Have your children name them. I typically forget sound for some reason when I'm naming them off, and I just about forgot it there too. So then you can have them discuss what their favorite smells might be. It could be chocolate chip cookies, that's a famous one, or baking bread, or maybe the way your sheets smell after you get them out of the laundry. Your favorite sights could be a pizza or ice cream or a mountain. Your favorite sounds could be any number of things. Could be music, could be someone's voice, so on and so forth. Then you will introduce the herbs that you have selected. Allow your children to explore them, ask questions. If you allow them to touch them, which you should, make sure they do so gently. Some herbs like basil and mint are very delicate and they bruise very easily. So have them be gentle. This is always a good time to talk about appropriate behavior. Okay, this is not an activity where you'll be running around and being crazy. You're asking your children to be responsible with these plants. Plants do have feelings in a different way than we do, but they will bruise. And there's a really famous experiment. If you play classical music to plants versus rock music, you'll see a huge difference in their growth. So they do respond to gentle touch. Then if you would like them to taste them, and if your children are interested, which they probably are, I again would suggest mint or basil. These two are most familiar to a lot of people, and they're pleasant to taste. They're not as rough and abrasive like, say, rosemary, or oregano can be really strong as well. So mint is a pleasant feeling for a lot of people. Basil is different kinds of basil can be minty or chocolatey or just fresh. So I would recommend using those for taste tests. But if they want to be more adventurous and try some of the other ones that you have available, that's awesome. And definitely let them do that. If they don't want to swallow, it's okay. They can spit it out as well. Don't feel like they have to chew it and swallow it because it may not be appealing for them. Now, cooking with herbs has quite a range of experience. Okay, fresh herbs versus dried herbs is very different. Dry herbs, you're not going to need as much because they're so much more potent. Fresh herbs, they wilt easily because of the heat. They're vibrant when they're fresh, but when you apply heat to them, they lose a lot of their vibrancy pretty quickly. Using fresh herbs demonstrates a different way of cooking and using what's available to you. And I don't know, it always makes me feel so old-fashioned in a good way to cook with fresh herbs. It makes me feel more connected to what I'm doing. Now, if you are using fresh herbs to cook with, you want to gently pinch off the leaves from the plant, like a basil or a cilantro or a parsley or a mint. Or for the woodier varieties, like in this picture here, this is thyme. You can use scissors to trim the woodier varieties of herbs. Thyme, rosemary, oregano, all of those have that kind of woody stem. And it's much more tedious to pick leaves off of these. So what you want to do is you hold the stem up by the end, the tip, where it's more limber. My arrow is pointing to it there. And with your other hand, you'll just slowly pull your hand back down, and it's going against the grain of the leaves, if you will. They're growing towards your hand that's holding it, and when you pull backward, the leaves just pop right off. It's going against what they usually grow. So your hand runs from the skinny part down to the thicker part. You don't really want to eat the stems. Now, if you're just going to throw them into a pot with some stew and then pull them out when you're done, you don't need to take the stems out. But if you're making something like a sauce or a salad, then you definitely want the stems removed because they're just not tasty. Okay, they're woody and they don't add anything. Some stems, like parsley stems or basil stems, they do add something, especially if you're making pesto. You can just throw it all in there and puree it, no big deal. Now, some herbs, like I've mentioned, like basil and mint, they bruise very easily. So tearing basil helps bruise it less rather than like cutting it with a knife. But a lot of recipes tell you to chiffonade it, which is rolling the leaves up and then cutting it very finely. Again, it bruises it. How much appearance matters to you, is very subjective. If you're using it for something in a salad, like a salad, I would just rip it personally. But if you're cooking it, it really doesn't matter because it's going to lose that vibrancy anyway. So you can definitely cut it. No big deal. So the benefits of this lesson are many, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but teaching children how to cook is always a great idea because the more they can cook for themselves, the more self-reliant they are, and cooking at home saves you a lot of money as well. Then as far as this activity goes, like I mentioned, it can be stretched over 5 days. You can do 1 herb dish per day. You can also expand this to do it for longer, and you can do this lesson more than once to highlight other herbs, or if you have found multiple recipes for the same herb and your student really liked, basil or oregano, then you can do that as well. Plants in your home benefit you in many ways. They help oxygenate your house. Statistically, you're more happy if there are plants in your house because it's something bright and cheerful to take care of. It also benefits you because you're using something that's fresh rather than, buying herbs in a store that probably came from Mexico or California. It's right in your home. It hasn't traveled as far, especially if you're growing them yourself. There's just an endless number of benefits. And herbs have a crazy amount of medicinal benefits as well. And herbal supplements and all that sort of thing. So they're just really great to have in your house. I love having plants in my house. And it also teaches your children to appreciate small wonders, watching a plant grow. If you cut a shoot off of, like, say, basil, and you put it in a jar of water, it will eventually grow roots because, again, it's one of those hydroponic test plants. It loves water. So you're teaching your children about the wonders of plants and how they work in a very small circumstance that can impact them in so many different ways. And they're just fun to have around, even if you don't have kids. I've always had herbs around. So recipe number 1 involves my friend mint, and it makes a really delicious lemonade. So what you need for this recipe is 3 to 4 lemons. Fresh squeezed lemon juice is best. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can certainly use bottled, which you can get in your grocery store. It's always hard for me to find, so it's really difficult for me to tell you where that would be. Just ask somebody for help in your store. You're going to need water, you're going to need sugar, and you're going to need 2 tablespoons of mint cut up or torn. So you start out by making a simple syrup. You put the water and the sugar in the simple syrup. You stir it until the sugar combines and you bring it to a boil. Once it starts to boil and the sugar is completely dissolved, remove it from the heat and allow it to cool. You can put it in the fridge if you want to cool it down faster. That's totally an option. Then in a pitcher or some other container, add some ice cubes. You'll add an additional 2 cups of water, the lemon juice you've prepared, your cooled simple syrup, and mint. You'll stir it together and you'll serve it. Obviously, this is best served cold, but fresh made lemonade, there's just no comparison. It's so better than anything ever. It's so good and it's so refreshing, and it really doesn't take that long. You can do this with oranges too. Orange would be really good with some herbs. Grapefruit would be really interesting. I don't particularly like grapefruit, but I would totally try it like this. You might have to mess with the sugar ratio. If you do not like to use sugar, and some people don't, that's fine. Or if making simple syrup seems a little too complicated for you, you can substitute with honey, and honey, lemon, and mint are a perfect trio. So that's an option. If that is too much for you, which I can understand, you can take mint, watermelon, and feta, cut everything up and toss it together, and it's a really delicious, sweet salty salad, and it's very refreshing, and it's so, so good. And that is really easy. You can buy feta already cut up. You can buy watermelon already cut up, and you can get some mint leaves, take them off the stem, throw everything together. Bam, done. So good. It won't cost you a lot either. So that's recipe number 2 is basil pizza. And there's this fancy name for it, but we won't get into that. It's basically a cheese pizza with basil on it. For this, you can either make your own pizza crust, which is fun, and if you need a recipe for that, please email me, because I have a really good one that doesn't involve yeast, because I have very bad luck with yeast. You can buy your own, or you can make your own. You can buy or make your own pizza sauce as well. I have a great recipe for that. If you would like it, just email me. And then you need some mozzarella cheese. I do not have a recipe for mozzarella cheese. You're on your own on that one. And then you need some basil. So basically, you assemble pizza in the normal ways, easy, and then you just add the basil. So you can add the basil and then it be cooked, and your basil will shrivel up a little bit. It'll still be flavorful. It'll just be a different kind of flavor. Or you can add it after your pizza's out of the oven, sprinkle it on top, and it's more fresh. Either way is appropriate. Either way is fine. Ultimately, it comes down to what you like. And maybe you do half of it, half the pizza with cooked basil, and then the other half with fresh at the end. Either way, that's fine. If making a pizza is too much, I understand. Especially if you're going to make your own, it can be kind of overwhelming. So if you make sandwiches or wraps or salads, you can add in basil to substitute some of the lettuce or all of the lettuce. It'll really wake up your salads or your sandwiches. So that's another option if making a pizza is too much, which I get it. It is a lot to work. Recipe number 3 involves dill. Now, if you don't like dill, which I understand, there's obviously other options you can trade out for this. My husband personally doesn't really like dill because it is really strong. So, if you've never tried dill before, fresh, the recipe does call for 2 tablespoons. Maybe start with like 1 tablespoon and work up to 2 tablespoons because it is really strong. I personally only like it in ranch. Otherwise, I don't really care for dill. It's just a punch in the face. It's very strong. So for this recipe, you would be making your own ranch dressing. Very easy to do. You need dill. You need parsley. You wouldn't necessarily have to have fresh here if you don't want to, but if parsley is one of your herbs that you're using, here's an easy 2-for-1. You're going to need vinegar. I typically use apple cider vinegar, but if you only have white vinegar on hand or some other vinegar, that's totally fine. Onion powder and garlic powder and salt are the last things you'll need. And then you need something creamy. I typically use Greek yogurt, or you can just use plain regular yogurt. Some recipes will tell you buttermilk mixed with some sour cream. Some recipes will say sour cream and mayonnaise. I only ever use yogurt just because that's what I always have on hand. I use yogurt for about 1 million different things. So viewer's choice on that one. You'll need about a cup though, whatever you decide to do. If it's just yogurt or a combination of things, you need about a cup. And then you just mix all those herbs and spices into the creamy deliciousness that you've chosen, mix it up, and then you just need some veggies to dip in it, some carrots or celery or whatever. Some grilled meat would be good to dip in it, whatever. I will also say, as far as vinegar goes, if you don't want to use vinegar and you have some lemons left over from the lemonade, lemon juice works fine too. So again, if this is too much, and I understand, you can put dill in salads or on top of grilled or baked fish. It's really good with salmon. If you like salmon, if you don't like salmon, then make some ranch dressing. I understand. Dill is really good with tuna as well. Sometimes you can buy canned tuna that has dill and lemon juice on it. It's really good. It's not fresh, but it's really good, and it's a cheap way to taste dill. So check it out. So now we have strawberry rosemary yogurt pops, which has too many R's and too many Y's in it. Okay, this is a really fun recipe. Your kids will love it. It does require a little bit of effort just because there's a lot of things going on, but I promise you, once you try it, you will love it. So you're going to need 1 cup of chopped fresh strawberries, 2 tablespoons balsamic vinegar. I would consider this kind of optional. Again, if you have like some sort of acid like lemon juice, that would totally work instead. Especially if you bought lemon juice instead of squeezing it yourself, you probably have extra and you're thinking, what am I going to do with this? So any kind of acid will work, like a lemon or oranges would be really good. Anything like that's fine. You don't necessarily have to buy a whole bottle of balsamic vinegar. I don't keep that on hand in my house. And then 2 tablespoons of strawberry jam. Again, I would say this is kind of optional as well, just because strawberries are naturally sweet. So if you're interested in keeping your sugar intake to a minimum, I would just cut the strawberry jam. Then you need 2 fresh sprigs of rosemary that you'll just either cut off, or maybe that's all that's in your container if you bought it. And then you need 1.5 cups of plain or vanilla yogurt. Again, if you're trying to cut sugar, you don't want your kids having a lot of sugar, understandably so, I would go with plain over vanilla, or you can just add some vanilla extract if you want to do that. That way you don't have any added sugar. Typically, when companies start adding flavoring, they add sugar too. So read your labels. Then you need some sort of popsicle mold, or what I would use, because I don't have popsicle molds, is I would just use a muffin tin that you bake muffins in. You put your cupcake liners in there, and then you just need like a stick, some kind of stick, which you can just use craft sticks if you wanted to, whatever you have on hand. And then you'll just put all of your filling in the cupcake tin, put your sticks in, and then throw it in the freezer. You will need to clear out your freezer if it's full in order to get your cupcake tin in there, but that's totally an option. Or you can use paper cups and then put the sticks in the paper cups. You could do that. There's so many different ways you can do it. Just be creative. So in a bowl, you'll mix the strawberries, the vinegar, jam, and rosemary and let it stand for 30 minutes. This macerates the strawberries, kind of breaks them down, brings out their sweetness. Again, if you don't have vinegar, acid works just fine. If you want to skip this process and mash them up, I'm sure that would be okay. You might have a little bit of a different flavor, but if that's easier for you, then by all means experiment. You'll let everything sit together to get that rosemary flavor embedded in your strawberries. Throw the rosemary stems away. Like I mentioned, rosemary stems are not tasty, so chuck them. And then into your mold, you'll layer 2 tablespoons of the yogurt, then 1 tablespoon of the strawberry mixture, and layer it until they're full, and then continue until you don't have any left. And then insert your sticks as necessary. Freeze until firm. If you don't want to make it a yogurt pop, like something you freeze, you could just make it like a parfait, put it in a tall glass, and then you could add some whipped cream or some granola or something like that if you want to. You wouldn't have to be frozen, is what I'm trying to say. Now, if this is too hard, which I understand, there's a lot of moving parts in this recipe compared to some of our other ones. Rosemary is excellent in mashed potatoes or roasted potatoes. So if you want to do that, that's a good option. If you do it in mashed potatoes, you're going to want to chop it up very finely or use a food processor to really break it down, because rosemary is very woody and tough. So I would recommend chopping it very finely in some method or another. It's also really good when you roast meat. If you're a meat eater, this is a great option, but I would probably just use it in roasted veggies because we don't eat a lot of meat. So check that out. As promised, I have some other suggestions for you if any of those last 4 didn't work or you're doing something different, whatever. Cilantro is really great in fresh salsa. Remember, though, that cilantro doesn't taste good to some people, so you might have a little bit of an adventure there. Some people think it tastes like soap. Some people really like it. I happen to be one that likes it. Thyme and fresh tomato sauce is incredible, so that's a really good option. And if you're making homemade pizza, here you go. Oregano is pretty much amazing in everything, but it's really good in eggs, so I recommend doing that. Parsley is always good with roasted vegetables. I love parsley and roasted vegetables. Then sage is kind of a rough spice, or herb, I mean. It has a really great texture, though, if you want your kids to touch it. It's very soft and kind of fuzzy, but it is very aggressive in taste. So I would recommend doing it with roasted vegetables or some kind of roasted meat. Roasted squash is amazing with sage. Don't eat it, just you just put it into your roasting dish with your vegetables like you would rosemary, and then just pull it out at the end. You don't have to eat it, but you'll still get that flavor. Chives and potatoes, classic pairing. It's good in potato salad. It's good on baked potatoes. It's pretty much good anywhere you would put an onion. Tarragon is amazing in chicken salad, or really boost your chicken salad flavor. And then if you're into lavender, lavender is great in scones and tea and a number of other things. I personally don't care for lavender, but I know a lot of people that do and love it in scones. So those are options for you. Wrapping up, I hope you enjoyed all of these different recipes. I hope to be able to offer you a tutorial on how to make some of these in the future. If you have any questions, as always, email me at learningbearpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe, share, and like. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.